20-point wins or 2 20-point deficits, to start the series. That equals a recipe for success. And if the Celtics come back and they advance and they beat the Knicks, I imagine that there are going to be a lot of tough conversations happening in New York after this. I don't know if a coaching change is still on the table. I don't know if they say we got to bring in more of a bully mentality. There's a lot that needs to be discussed if they lose.
All right, no, feet to the fire. Come on. The Knicks blow the series. Is Tom Thibodeau the head coach next year in your mind? If you were in charge, knowing Michael Malone is sitting there. Now, Michael Malone, as great as he is, David Edelman looks pretty good too, even losing right now in Denver.
Right.
But I think it's nuts to have the conversation we're having unless the drastic thing actually happens where they actually blow the 3-1 lead without Tatum. If they do it, would you bring Thibodeau back next year? If Michelle Smallman ran the Knicks?
It's really hard because I think Tibbs is a good coach. And obviously this group has responded to him, their identity and the way that they play, that leaving skin on the floor, as Tim Legler says, mentality. A lot of that stems from Tibbs. The players certainly have to inherently have that mentality, but he brings it out in them and he fosters that in the environment that he's created. And gosh, that's such a tough one because he's a really, really good coach. But if you lose this series with this set of circumstances, I could absolutely see James Dolan and the powers that be saying, we need to switch things up. We've got to maximize this Brunson window, this window that we've put together in order to try to win.
We're on Sportsmanlike here on ESPN Radio. We were presented by Progressive Insurance. The other game last night, the Warriors eliminated by the Wolves. Golden State loses 121-110. Second straight Western Conference Finals for the T-Wolves. Kudos to them. Phenomenal job. Julius Randle has been so good. 29 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists.
He's been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think he may be the playoff MVP. I'm not actually kidding. At least relative to expectations. No one is exceeding expectations more than him.
Really good for them.
Yeah.
Really good for them.
He's phenomenal. And he's got that dog in him. DiVincenzo's got that dog in him. And Anthony Edwards has that talent and that dog in him. So they got a little bit of everything there.
So who won that trade? I'm still trying to figure out who won that trade.
Yes. I think we may find out in June.
Well, I mean,
if they play each other.
Well, you said we may find out in June. If the Knicks don't make it out of this series against the Celtics, I think we have our answer.
Well, yeah, in that case, yes. Let's talk about the Warriors. They're done. Steph Curry, the T-Wolves did their job. That was as much of a must-win as anything last night because you cannot let Steph Curry back in this series. It is horrible that he got hurt. We all feel terrible for him.
Yeah.
The T-Wolves don't need to feel terrible for him. The T-Wolves need to look at it and say, we could never let him back on the floor. We knew he was going to potentially come back Game 6, and they never let him back on the floor. And now what for the Warriors? Now what happened? Steve Kerr, head coach of the Warriors, post-game, the Steph what if. Does that now play a factor with the Warriors?
Injuries are, part of the playoffs. I learned a long time ago, the playoffs are really about health and then just guys stepping up and making some big shots, big plays, in key games. That's what decides every series. So we've been on both ends of that. That's just part of it. So there's no sense in dwelling on it. I don't want to take anything away from what Minnesota just accomplished. So no sense in even talking about Steph.
Okay. Fair, understood. Draymond Green had this to say about the future of the Warriors.
I think we'll be right back at it. Sucks to end this way, but we think we got the pieces to make another run at it and do it again, and that's going to be our mindset going into the summer. Do all that got to do to improve. We got one of the best ownership groups and front offices in the NBA who know they'll do whatever they feel is needed to help the team improve. And us as players, you got to get back in the lab and do what you got to do to get better.
So Draymond, back at it. I understand what he's saying because their record with all of their guys healthy was very good this year. They got Jimmy for moments like this, and just in case Steph is not healthy, Jimmy Butler the last few games, maybe banged up. It's not the playoff Jimmy that we saw previously, obviously, in Miami, which was not the playoff Jimmy we saw in Philly, to be fair, or Chicago, or Minnesota. It happened one spot because the team was built around him, and that's obviously different in this case. No, I'm saying it shouldn't be built around him. It's Steph Curry. So is this dynasty now over?
What, you're thinking he's getting at Miami, bringing out the best in players?
Yes, man, let it go, man. Jimmy Butler is an absolute
that's obvious.
dog.
Everyone knows that.
He's been a dog no matter where he's been. He's just got with a functional franchise in the Miami Heat relative to the Chicago Bulls or the Minnesota Timberwolves back in the day or the Philadelphia 76ers. So when Jimmy's with a functional team, Obviously, in the postseason, it brings out the best in him, but he's only been there half a season.
Right. And they had a great record with him.
This roster is not oriented around him. Like you said, it's Steph Curry's team.
Yep.
Only problem I have with Draymond's logic is that older guys don't get healthier as they get later in their careers. Dre and Jimmy are 35 years old. Steph Curry's 37. So there's no guarantee that this won't happen if the Warriors get back to this exact same spot next year. And you have to question with this roster, are they going to be able to find reliable depth where they don't have to play those guys as extensive minutes as they've been playing them? I don't know. There are more questions than answers in Golden State. And while you do want them to be able to take advantage of the twilight of Steph Curry's career, we have to also acknowledge that they have to do some major retooling on that team in order for them to be able to maximize what Curry brings out to the table.
All right, I put Small's feet to the fire on Tibbs.
Yeah.
In your mind, if you were Mike Dunleavy Jr. and you ran the Golden State Warriors, was that Draymond Green's last game with your franchise?
Yes. Yes.
Do you tell
listen,
Steph?
I have to have some.
Steph's back?
Let me be clear about one thing. Yeah. I have to have elements of Draymond Green. I have to. So even with the moving pieces, even if I do decide to trade him, I've got to find some guys that are dogs to bring back. I've got to have that type of temperament in my locker room because you have to have a bully, especially around Steph Curry. He's got to have an enforcer. It's kind of like hockey in that way. So you have to have that element. But Draymond has so much valuable because he's got championship DNA, because he's got 4 rings, because he's been there, because he's done that. There's going to be a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers that looks at Draymond Green and says, you know what? We need more of that in our locker room. You know what I'm saying? We need to have that type of element. Like these young upstart groups that have a lot of talent but don't necessarily have that nasty, don't have that dog. The Houston Rockets, they need a Draymond Green. The Detroit Pistons, they need a Draymond Green. Like those are teams that need that kind of element. But when you look at the Golden State Warriors, yeah, you feel like they need Draymond Green too, but they need so much other stuff in order to maximize what Steph Curry is bringing to the party.
All right, so very quickly, and there's not going to be a quick answer, but here we go. If you take Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga, would have to be a sign and trade. And this is now like 3, 4, 5 teams.
Yeah.
Is that enough to get you Giannis?
No.
Not to Milwaukee. Not to Milwaukee. What, like, in other words,
3-team
who
deal.
wants Jimmy? Okay, that you're going to get Jimmy and you're going to give us this. We're going to give it to Milwaukee. You know, who wants Draymond? Cleveland. Like, all right, what are you going to give us? Maybe Milwaukee would want Darius Garland, right? Who wants Kuminga? Sign and trade. Maybe it's the Nets and they would provide some draft pick. I'm just making this up. I wonder if that's where the Warriors offseason starts. In other words, I don't know that they have interest in trading Draymond, but Giannis gives you everything that Draymond gives you at a higher level. And I do wonder if they say the consolidation move is actually to get the greatest possible player that might be, and I don't know that he is, available. I just wonder if that's where their offseason starts. The regular season starts September 4th. We know who it's with. NFL schedule released yesterday. We will get to that after I tell you about La Quinta. La Quinta by...
Hello, xin chào tất cả các bạn nha. Mình sẽ giới thiệu cho các bạn về kênh của mình và những video của mình cho các bạn biết được là kênh của mình làm video sáng tạo nội dung về chủ đề gì. Video của mình sẽ làm xuyên suốt về chủ đề cắt dán này. Mình sẽ cắt dán những sản phẩm như thế này cho các bạn xem. Đây là những sản phẩm mình đã hoàn thiện rồi. Sẽ giới thiệu sơ qua cho các bạn xem những sản phẩm của mình và cách của mình tạo ra những sản phẩm như thế nào. Và để tạo ra được những sản phẩm đa dạng màu sắc như thế này và như thế này thì mình sẽ cần những dụng cụ như sau. Những dụng cụ phụ bổ trợ như là đây là giấy thủ công màu các bạn. Trước mặt bên tay phải của mình đây là giấy thủ công màu, nó có đa dạng những màu sắc để tạo ra những sản phẩm tuyệt đẹp cho các bạn xem. Đấy. Có giấy màu xanh dương này, giấy màu cam này các bạn này, giấy màu đỏ này, giấy màu vàng này. Còn đây là giấy màu xanh lá cây. Đấy. Và trong quá trình tạo ra những sản phẩm của mình cần những sản phẩm, cần những dụng cụ như là bút dạ này, kéo cắt thì để dùng để cắt, bút dạ thì để dùng để tạo hình những sản phẩm. Còn đây là hồ dán các bạn ạ. Hồ dán thì mình sẽ dán những sản phẩm từ một chi tiết này sang chi tiết khác, từ màu sắc này sang màu sắc khác cho các bạn. Còn đây sau của mình đây là chiếc chân kẹp điện thoại. Chân kẹp điện thoại thì phải có điện thoại. Còn đây là đèn hỗ trợ ánh sáng của mình các bạn ạ. Đèn hỗ trợ ánh sáng để giúp cho video của mình sáng hơn, để cho các bạn xem đẹp hơn. Cái nồi của mình đây.